The reason that a lot of schools stopped teaching grammar in a formal way is because of a new fashion that arose particularly in schools of education, which said that teaching the rules of standard English grammar was a political action and that it was oppressive to people whose home dialect or home language is something other than the mainstream Wonder Bread standard. And so for many people that meant that to teach nouns, adverbs, verbs, what a quote-unquote proper sentence was in the old-fashioned way was not just old-fashioned but rude, that it didn't acknowledge the plurality among people in the way they talk. And the fact of the matter is that it's important for students to learn standard English. There's really no excuse for not teaching anybody in society what the code is that is considered socially acceptable, because the simple fact is that whether we like it or not, there's always going to be a certain way of speaking and a certain way of writing that's considered the proper one. However, what should change is the idea that when people casually speak or write in ways other than that standard way, that they're doing something wrong rather than something different. And it's really hard to wrap your mind around that, because we're so often told that there's something called grammar, that it has certain rules, and if you break those rules, it's wrong in the same way as doing arithmetic the wrong way. But it really just isn't true scientifically. Today, there are a great many things that we are taught are wrong or illogical or are not clear. What's interesting is that if you went back just 100 years, not 1,000, not 500, not to anything that we would consider a whole different stage of humankind, but just 100 years here in New York City, and you talk to people about what their notions were of what was proper English and what was improper English, they would often be completely different. Many of the things that they thought were wrong are things that we would never think of today. Many of the things that they thought were right were things that today we think of as awfully precious or as almost silly. And so my idea is that we need to think of grammar in the sense of what's the proper grammar and what isn't as a matter of fashion. And what's important is it's not that one shouldn't adhere to fashion. A person cannot, within a given time frame, walk around in the clothing of another time without being made fun of, and there's even something to be said for them feeling ridiculous. Fashion is arbitrary. It's not there was something wrong with petticoats, but nevertheless fashion is. It's the same way with grammar. There are fashions. However, nobody would say that a corset was erroneous. Nobody would say that a waistcoat was an error. It was just something that was different. And it's the same way with how people speak. There will always be a certain code at a certain time that's considered the proper way. But it isn't that whenever people speak or write in some different way, they're committing some sort of error against logic or clarity or the nature of being human. It's just a matter of fashion. I think that it's important to have an understanding of the grammar of your speech for two reasons. One, if your home language or dialect is one that happens to be generally despised, it can really help in terms of your self-image, in terms of your ability to advocate for your group, and just in terms of being a part of society, to understand that the way you speak has rules. And that's true of speakers of Black English, of Appalachian English, of Haitian Creole, of a vernacular African language that someone may have learned from their parents that they think is not a language because it isn't written down, when actually it's probably more complex than modern English. That's important. In terms of standard English, to know the grammatical structure of your language is something that will enable a person to be more articulate. Now, I think that in this day and age, the ability to speak articulately off the cuff before an audience is relatively marginal. You need it in certain contexts, maybe such as participating in a documentary, but in terms of making a speech or even talking before a class, the standard of articulateness in our lives since about 1960 has changed so much that I'm not sure that the reason one should understand grammar is so that you can stand up in front of 50 people and say something. I think there's a baseline level of colloquial articulateness that's enough in our society today. Some people would differ with me, but that's what I think. But in terms of writing, which is a much more conscious activity, and one where the people who are engaging what you do have more time to check up on your fluency, on your facility, on your articulateness. It certainly helps to understand the mechanics of how a sentence works. Even if you're going to break the rules, it helps to know them at first. And it's unfortunate to see that even in high places like elite universities today, many students have never been taught that kind of thing. Because what you notice is that perfectly ordinary students 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, were capable of writing on a level that flabbergasts us today. We think they must have been geniuses or they must have been members of the elite, but no, it was part of the drinking water, it was part of the DNA of society to train people in rules of grammar. Today we think of it as old-fashioned, but what it means is that back then, a perfectly ordinary person could come out of 8th grade writing in a way that would wind almost anybody but the very most talented college students today. And there's something to be said for that kind of articulateness, even if today it would mostly be on the written level, especially because today writing includes email. Writing, depending on what you call it, includes texting. You write more today as an ordinary person than you did 25 years ago. So there's definitely something to be said there for an explicit understanding of grammar as well.